Hello everyone and welcome back to another Gloo tutorial. In this video I'm going to walk you through form extensions for Elementor forms. Now let's get into it. What we're going to look at today is the SuperGloo add-on form extensions. So if we're going to settings, we've got some extensions here. So we've got front-end post submission, post editing, user submission, user editing, and form fields for terms. What we're going to do is create with the Elementor form widget, we're going to create a form that allows us to create a post, and we can post in things like the title, the content, you can post into specific terms from taxonomies, and of course you can do the same with an editable form. So if you've got a post that you need to update, you can do this with a front-end form, again with an Elementor widget. And the same can be done with a user submission and user editing. Again, this has the ability to allow you to insert usernames, passwords, email addresses, and even assign a specific role for that particular user. So let's go ahead and make sure that all of these are enabled, and you need to enable the module itself here. So if we jump into our page, let's go ahead and get started and take a look at how we can work with the SuperGloo form extension. The first thing that we're going to do is search for the Elementor form widget. So it's just the default Elementor widget. What we're going to do is remove a couple of these fields here. We're going to create a form that will allow us to create a post from the front end. So we don't need to go into WP admin and create a post. We can create a form directly from the front end. So let's go ahead and explore some of the options that are now available to us. The first thing that we need to do is take a look at the actions after submit. Now you'll notice that with this extension enabled, we now have front-end post submission, user registration, post editing, and user editing. So let's go ahead and select front-end post submission. Let's remove these for the purposes of the test. Let's take a look at this new field that's available, so front-end post submission. And the way this works is we can select the post type that we want to submit to, and of course you've got all of these options available, so it picks them up. So if we go ahead and just post into the standard posts, we can then set the status of the post once posted, so draft, pending, review, private, or published. And then what we have here is the field ID, so this is what we have to map. So when we create the form fields, when we take a look at the advanced tab, we have the ID. So whatever we set the ID to is what we have to map to insert into these specific fields. Now of course we've got the title, the content, and the featured image. We also have terms and meta fields, so you can include additional fields. So for instance, if you wanted to post into a specific term from a taxonomy, and of course you can include, if you've got any custom meta fields, you can do this directly from the form as well, so we can submit into those. And of course there's an option for registered users only, so you could hide this away from general users or prevent them from using this form. So let's go ahead and create some fields. Let's go to form fields. And what we're going to do is use this message field for the post content. So if we go ahead and place in our label as post content, and if we name the field ID as post content, so this is the ID that we're actually going to use to map. So let's go ahead and take a copy of this, go back to front-end post submissions, and paste this into the content field. So let's go ahead and do the same for title and featured image. Let's create a new item. If we call this post title, go into advanced and change this to post title, take that and place it in here. And just to organize this a little bit better, let's move this around. And let's go ahead and add our featured image. So what we need to do is select file upload. Now you may notice there's a few more options than normal, but let's go ahead and first of all make this featured image as the ID. Let's place this in the correct field. So now that we've got our field ID set, what we're going to do is explore this file upload. So if we call this featured image, so it's easily recognizable, we have the required field. So of course, if you want to make this required when submitting the post itself, We also have this new option called Upload to Media Library. What would normally happen is it would submit it and save it in a separate folder. We can store this directly in the media library. We also have a new option called Image Upload UI, and what this does is gives us a preview of the image that we're about to upload, or when you're editing a post, it will show us the existing image. We also have the option for a max file size. Now, of course, this is dependent on the resources that you have available. It's always sensible to do this to ensure that your server is not always being constantly drained from huge uploaded files. Also, we have allowed file types, so we can separate these out by commas, so you can just select the file extensions that you want to use and only allow. So in our case, we'll do JPEG and PNG, but of course you can do PDF, GIF files, etc. Now, there's also an option for multiple files. So as by standard, this is just a single file upload, but of course if we want to include the use of multiple files, we just toggle this on, and then of course we can set the amount of maximum files that you want to allow to be uploaded. So before we test it, let's turn off multiple files so that we only have the option to upload a single file, because this is going to be for the featured image. So let's go ahead and update this and take a look at this on the front end. So we're going to do a test post and show you what this looks like when it gets posted into the default WordPress posts. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's do test title, test content, and let's go ahead and choose an image. If we hit send, take a look at our posts, we will see that there is a new post submission of test title, test content, and the featured image that we submitted. So the next stage is we're going to post into one of our categories. Before we begin adding the categories or taxonomies and terms to the form, it's important to note that within the forms extension settings, you must enable form fields for terms, and this gives us new options and new fields within the form itself. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. So when we select our form, within the form fields, we have a new item, which is called terms field. And this gives us a bunch of new options to access and fetch those taxonomies and terms that we need. So the way we do this is if we head over to query, we either have by taxonomy or manual selection. We're going to choose by taxonomy. And if we select our categories from the list, as you can see, there's various other taxonomies available from WordPress. We're going to use categories here. Obviously nothing's showing at the moment, but what we need to do in order to display these is select the output. So we have three options, which is select, radio, and checkbox. We're going to use checkbox. As you can see, this is fetched back all of the categories that are available for posts. What we can do is tidy this up slightly just to make it a little bit easier for the user. So the first thing that we're going to do is not display uncategorized. Now, the way that you exclude any of the terms is by simply heading into the exclude terms field. If you begin typing the name of the category that you want to remove from the list, just simply type it in here and select that category. Now, as you can see, it's just displaying the categories that we want to display to the user. We have some further options. We have an option for depth, and what this means is that we can display just the parent elements or the child and grandchild elements. We're going to display it all for now because I want to show you the style options. So if we head over to the style tab, we now have a terms field option which allows us to style these elements. So we can change the color and the typography, and also the color and typography for the child elements. And of course, we have a toggle to indent the child terms just to make this a little bit easier to see. Now the final step is if we go back to the content, we need to give the field a label, so we're going to call it categories. And of course, we need to give this a unique ID. So we're going to call it post categories. We need to take this ID. We then need to go to front end post submissions. We then need to go to terms and then paste our ID in the form field ID box. So if we go ahead and update this now, and then we preview the changes, as you can see, the categories are now showing. So let's go ahead and do a test post again. So test 2. Let's choose our image. This time we're going to select some categories that we want this to display in. So let's go ahead and send that now. The form was sent successfully. So as you can see, our post has been submitted with the correct title and also been submitted into the correct categories. So the next thing that we need to look at is how to actually edit a post from a front-end form submission. Now it's mega easy to do. It's just a case of changing the actions after submit. So let's go ahead and explore those a little bit now. So as mentioned before, we have front-end post submission, which we've explored, front-end user registration, post editing, and user editing. What we're now looking at is front-end post editing. Now on our single page template, what I've done is copied the form over and change the actions after submit. Now when you do this, you need to remap the form fields. So the form fields are all exactly the same, we just need to remap them. So we've got our post title, post content, featured image, and post categories. Now most importantly, we need to fetch the post ID because that is the ID of the post that we're working with. So the way you do this is you select the dynamic tag and you select post ID. That will recognize the post that you're on and fetch that information so it becomes readily available to edit. So as you can see, we've got our featured image here. The form fields are now pre-populated. So if we were to edit any of this information, we can resubmit it and it'll update the post. So as you can see, we've got our featured image, our title, our content, and the selected categories. So if we were to change any of these, change the featured image, and update the post title to test3 and submit. What will happen now is when we refresh, the post content's changed. As you can see, the title has changed, the featured image has changed, and of course all of the information is now stored and saved against our latest submission. Turn our attention to the front-end user registration form. Again, all we do is simply use an Elementor form widget. The actions after submit are going to be front-end user registration. This time the form fields and the front-end user registration fields are going to differ from the forms shown in the previous form that we created for post submission. In this instance, we have assign role, which can be administrator, editor, author, contributor, subscriber, and of course any other roles that you may have. The field IDs are going to be username, password, repeat password, and email domain, user data, meta fields, and term fields. You can submit any of this data that you wish and map it to any of the fields that exist within your user profiles. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to need a username field, a password field, a repeat password field. So let's go ahead and do that now. So if we begin by removing the message, let's use our name field and replace this with username. Same again for the placeholder. And of course, the ID field. So if we select username, we're going to leave this as subscriber and we're going to create two fields for password and repeat password. So let's go ahead and do that now. Password. Our ID is going to be password. Let's copy this down and do confirm password, and confirm password. Now if we turn our attention back to front-end user registration, we have the field password and confirm password. So if we take a look at this email domain field, is if we have a username set, we can then append the domain that we're working on. But in our case, we want to allow the user to create their own email address from the form with the field supplied here. So what we're going to do is toggle on require email, and then if we go back to our form fields, our email is type email and the ID is email. If we place that in there, that's going to map to the email field. Now if we take a look at some of the other information that we can input, we can add user data. So we can allow form fields for display name, nickname, first name, last name, and description. And then of course we can add meta fields or term fields if applicable. So let's go ahead and save this now. If we go ahead and take a look at the form on the front end, so let's go and create a user. So test user. Let's let's go ahead and submit this now. Now if we take a look at our users list, so as you can see we've got our test user. So if we take a look at the profile, the username, the role is set correctly, and the display name and nickname is all set, along with the email address. Of course the password has been set already. So the final option is if we click on the form, and if we take a look at actions after submit, the final option is front-end user editing. And as you can imagine, it's exactly the same as when you edit a post like we did in the previous example. But again, this is just updating a user. So you may have a dashboard for administrators on the front end where you just want the ability to edit users' information such as roles, email addresses, and passwords and so on. So there we have it, guys. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye for now.